Let's talk about on the back end free safety. I want Jimmy Ward back, and yet I've heard rumors of of Jesse Bates, which would be a higher ticketed item. I think Bates might be a little bit better in pass coverage, but I like Ward's physicality. CJ Gardner Johnson is a personal favorite of mine because I like violent football players on defense, and he's about as violent as it comes. If you don't believe me, go ask Isaiah Pacheco in the Super Bowl. And then you got Tayshaun Gibson's a free agent as well. Jamie Robinson from Florida State just seems like a perfect fit in a lot of ways for the Niners. I also kind of like Jair Brown from Penn State. What did you were there? What did you think of the free safeties in Indy, and how do you kind of put this thing together? They got a Fong at strong safety, but then they may have a need at nickel. We don't know about Mosley. They may need more depth at corner. They may need a free safety, and they need a dynamic player, I think. I mean, that's why I like CJ Gardner Johnson, because I think he's dynamic, but I really want Ward to stay because I think you need continuity back there. What's your feeling? How are they going to find a great player in their secondary? Did you see a great player in the secondary in Indy, or at least did anybody work out great or interview great?
Jamie Robinson was my favorite interview of the entire week. Any position, any player. I had tremendous respect for the amount of intellect he displayed, the charisma he spoke with, the thought that he had with his answers, the ability to expand on topics outside of just the game of football. He blew me away. I stayed at his podium for like 15 minutes because of how just captivating he was speaking. And I'll be honest, when I'm there, I'm usually bouncing from, trying to get as much stuff as possible. I was locked into Jamie Robinson. Kyle Posey is a Florida State guy. So immediately he had the full rundown for me on who he is as a player, what you can expect. And when you start diving into the tape, that's a guy where if I'm the Niners, I'd move 99 and one of the other, whether it's 101 or 102, I'd move two of those picks to move up into the earlier third round to select a guy like that, because I think he could be a key part of the secondary moving forward. I really, we didn't get the chance to see him work out, but I really liked JL Skinner out of Boise State. He's another guy who I think just has great athletic ability. Was really impressive.
He got hurt, didn't he?
Yeah, he tore his pec working out.
Tore his pec. So is he going to be a guy that should have gone in the fourth round that winds up in the seventh round because of the pec?
I think he's a guy who he would have gone in like the second round. He might still go earlier in day two, but I think he might fall towards maybe that middle third because of it. But from what I heard, teams aren't really deterred too much. He's supposed to be pretty much recovered by the time offseason workouts start again, from what I was hearing. So he's a guy who I really liked. If we're talking later in the draft, the other Boise State safety, Tyreek Jones, is another guy I was really impressed with, getting to talk to him. So there are a couple guys for sure that I talked with there that I thought were extremely impressive and intriguing options. There's another guy, I don't know if he'd play safety necessarily, but there's a guy who I really liked, Jacorian Bennett out of Maryland, had a fascinating story. He was a guy who, took the JUCO route, went to, junior college, and then had all these D1 offers, ended up at Maryland. And then the next day he ended up testing really well. He ran like 4.29, I want to say. He was really fast when he was testing, and he reminded me a ton of Jimmy Ward, really similar physical profiles, the way he was able to move, flip his hips. He's a guy who I wonder, the Niners obviously took Ward to be a corner and he made that transition. I wonder if they look at a profile of a player like that and they skip the first step and they just project them immediately to be a guy who could play on the back end at safety. So he's a guy that didn't play the position, but I wonder if he could make that transition seamlessly just based on what I saw. And then just for free agents, I would love to see a guy like Jesse Bates. I think he's going to be too expensive for the 49ers. Adrian Amos is a guy who I've always liked, dating back to his days in Chicago. He's with the Packers for a few seasons. I think they're just going to bring Gibson back, to be honest. I'd be interested to see what he's going to command, because I think he's absolutely going to get paid a pretty hefty raise to the deal he got last year. He seems like he wants to come back. The Niners seem like they want him back. And that's where I'm kind of inclined, Larry, to believe that maybe they'll take a DB that's kind of in that developmental role and then bring Gibson back for one more year if they can't bring Jimmy Ward back. But their best case scenario would be bringing Ward and Gibson back, because the secondary was phenomenal this year. And I think that any way you can keep that intact would obviously be your best interest going forward.
One more, I love the people in the chat because we've got some of the most intelligent people follow the show. This one's a good one. MGM Productions makes a donation. Do you think Marte Mapu can be our new bargain pick that can fill in as our tight end eraser, big nickel, similar to Jimmy Ward, leaving him to play strictly free safety? I love Mapu. Now, I went to Sac State, full disclosure, so maybe I'm a little biased. And I'm not sure that he's a DB. He might actually be a kind of a weak side backer, but I loved his instincts. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of kind of maybe a little bit bigger version of Hufanga. Did you get a chance to see any of Marte Mapu in Indianapolis? What are you hearing about the kid from Sac State?
I didn't, to be honest with you. I've seen a little bit of Sac State because they were a very captivating team to watch this season. Your analysis would be much more concrete than mine on that. I definitely have seen the flashes there. I haven't gotten to a point where I've watched enough that I could say confidently I feel one way or the other. But I think he's an intriguing prospect, and I think that it's really cool that Sac State has players like that are kind of putting that school on the map. And after the season they just had, the fact we're even able to talk about it's really cool. But full disclosure, I have not watched nearly enough to have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Well, I'll say this. When I was at Sac State, I didn't watch Sac State football. But now that I'm not at Sac State, I occasionally will watch Sac State football. The secondary is really interesting on a lot of fronts. One from the chat before we move to our next topic. Our 49er throwback says, Jordan, do you think Emmanuel Mosley comes back or goes to the Texans? Nick Bosa did an interview recently, and in that interview, he said, he either said it sounds like Mosley's coming back, or I think Mosley's coming back, or he made some reference to Mosley coming back. Maybe he's talked to Emmanuel himself. God knows they're probably buddies. I think Mosley is a key guy, man. He's a lifelong Niner. They found him. They discovered him as an undrafted free agent coming out of Tennessee, and he's been here ever since. What's your guess on where Mosley winds up this year?
I want to think that the Niners are going to prioritize bringing him back, but his value is so hard to gauge right now because had he not gotten hurt, I think it would have been really tough to bring him back. Spotrac has his value, and it's not a perfect science, but Spotrac does really good work, and they calculate market values and compare players at similar ages with similar production and stuff with their formula. And their market value for Mosley right now is $16.6 million a year. I don't think the 49ers can remotely come close to making an offer like that. But if there is some hesitance from other teams around the league to pay him due to that ACL injury, and if there's any complications with recovery timeline or it's not clear when he'll be back, I think that definitely favors the 49ers' chances of keeping him. But it's going to be hard. He was playing extremely, extremely good football before he ended up getting hurt in that game against the Panthers. He was one of the on the short list of best number 2 corners in the NFL, and he could have been a number 1 corner for a number of teams in the NFL with the way he was playing. So this might be one of those situations like we were talking about earlier in the show. They've been really good at identifying when and where to pay guys, the comp formula. This might be one of those ones where as much as it hurts, you let a guy like Mosley walk and you recoup that 5th round pick or whatever it may be next season. It's not necessarily something you're content doing, but it's a tough business decision you have to make because the unfortunate part about being a good football team is that you're not going to be able to pay everybody. And I think Mosley might have priced himself out with just how well he played. I would love to be wrong on that. But I think he deserves every penny that's coming his way. And I could definitely see a scenario where the Niners it's kind of similar to McGlinchey, where they just can't afford to pay all of these guys and somebody else with a lot more money sitting around can.